I can still hear the seas rage when I close my eyes. The echo of those cries tethered to my mind like salt to the air. It wasn't supposed to end this way. God, it wasn't supposed to end at all. But you need to hear it. Maybe if I tell you, you'll understand. Maybe someone will believe me. It all started when Liam invited Sarah and me to his uncle's island for a weekend retreat. It sounded perfect. A secluded getaway, no tourists, just us and the whispers of the waves. The lighthouse was the centerpiece, its weathered silhouette looming over the jagged cliffs like a sentry from another era. We arrived on Friday afternoon, our small motorboat slicing through the tranquil sea. Liam grinned as the lighthouse came into view. "A haunted island," he said with bravado, someone who didn't entirely believe his own words. Sarah rolled her eyes but smiled. I think she wanted to prove she was braver than him. I, on the other hand, kept my thoughts to myself. The first night was calm. We grilled dinner on the beach, watched the sun melt into the horizon, and drank far too much wine. The lighthouse was silent, its beacon dead for decades, though its presence was impossible to ignore. It felt alive somehow, even dormant. On the second night, the whispers began. I was the first to hear them, faint and fleeting, like the wind carrying distant voices. I brushed it off as a sea's song, but when Sarah froze mid-laugh and tilted her head toward the cliffs, I knew it wasn't just me. "You heard that, right?" she asked, her voice tight. Liam shrugged, trying too hard to look indifferent. "It's probably just the wind, or..." The whisper came again, louder this time. It wasn't the wind. We followed the sound up to the lighthouse. The air grew colder as we approached, the once warm night turning to icy breath. Inside, the space smelled of salt rust and something sour. The spiral staircase wound up into the darkness, every step creaking like a warning. "That's it," Sarah said. "We're doing this." "Doing what?" I asked, though I already knew. "A seance," she replied, her eyes glinting with a mix of fear and determination. "If something's here, let's make it show itself." Liam laughed nervously. "You got be kidding." But she wasn't, and neither was I when I agreed. We found an old ship's compass among the clutter in the lighthouse's base, its needle frozen in place. It felt fitting, something about guiding spirits and lost souls. We lit candles and sat in a circle, the compass between us, its glass face catching the flickering light. "Guiding spirit," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "If you're here, show us a sign." Nothing happened. Liam smirked, ready to call it quits. But then the air changed, heavy and suffocating, like the island itself was holding its breath. The compass needle began to spin. The candles flickered wildly before extinguishing, plunging us into darkness. Then the impossible. The lighthouse beacon roared to life, its eerie green glow slicing through the night. We froze, staring at one another, our faces illuminated in that unnatural light. And then came the footsteps. They echoed from the spiral staircase, deliberate and heavy, the sound of boots on metal. My heart hammered as a figure emerged, shrouded in shadow. It was tall and hunched, its form twisted as if the sea had tried to reshape it. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a void, darkness upon darkness, yet it emanated anguish, sorrow, and fury all at once. The whispers turned to wails, the cries of sailors lost to the depths. "You summoned me," the figure rasped, its voice like grinding stone. "Now you will guide the way." We bolted. Liam was first down the stairs, shouting for us to follow. The figure didn't chase us, but its presence pressed against my back like an invisible tide. Outside, the world was chaos. The sea, once calm, now raged, waves battering the island with a fury that seemed to echo the spirit's anguish. Our boat was gone, smashed to pieces against the rocks. "We're trapped," Sarah screamed, her voice barely audible over the storm. Liam grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the cliffs. "The caves," he yelled. "Maybe we can shelter there." But as we ran, the lighthouse beacon swiveled, its green glow locking onto us like a predator's gaze. The wails grew louder, drowning out even the storm. I don't remember falling, but I remember the cold embrace of the sea, the way it swallowed me whole. I remember Sarah's scream, cut short, and Liam's frantic voice calling my name before it. 2. Was lost. When I woke, it was morning. The sea was calm, the sky clear, as if nothing had happened. I was alone on the beach, my clothes damp but no sign of my friends. The lighthouse beacon still glowed, faint in the daylight but unmistakably alive. I staggered toward it, desperate for answers, but the door wouldn't budge. The island was empty. No boat, no footprints, nothing but the unyielding silence and the distant hum of the beacon. I managed to flag down a passing fishing boat that afternoon, though the crew wouldn't meet my eyes when I told them where I'd been. They say that lighthouse has been cursed for a century, the captain muttered. Guides shipped straight to their doom. When I looked back at the island, the lighthouse stood tall against the horizon, its green beacon burning like a malevolent eye. I'm telling you this because I need you to believe me. I need someone to know what happened. And if you ever see that light on the horizon, don't follow it. Please, for the love of God, don't follow it. I had always been drawn to the thrill of the unknown. That's how I ended up here, standing in the middle of Blackwood Cemetery, under a blood-red moon, daring myself to face whatever darkness lay buried within. I wasn't alone, of course. Mia, Jake, and Ethan were with me. We had spent countless hours seeking out the eeriest places, making bets about who could endure the most terrifying experiences. But Blackwood Cemetery was different. No one had dared to do what we were about to do, hold a seance at the crypt of the gravekeeper. The air was thick with anticipation as we made our way past gravestones overrun with weeds, their names obscured by time. The decrepit crypt loomed ahead, its stone facade cracked and weathered. The structure had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember, and rumors about it had spread like wildfire. People spoke of the gravekeeper, a spirit that was said to guard the cemetery, never allowing anyone to disturb the dead. But no one had ever dared challenge him. Until tonight. I can't explain why we thought we could get away with it. We were young, reckless, and convinced that nothing could hurt us. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Mia, Jake, Ethan, and I set up in the clearing just outside the crypt, the Ouija board carefully placed in front of us, the candles flickering in the cold wind. We had no real experience with seances, but we had watched enough horror movies to think we knew what we were doing. Mia, ever the skeptic, was already questioning the whole thing. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" she asked, glancing around nervously. "I mean, it's really quiet out here." Too quiet. Jake tried to mask his anxiety with a forced grin. "Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen. It's just an old cemetery. People are probably making up stories." Ethan, ever the daredevil, waved off their concerns. "I'm in. Let's summon the gravekeeper spirit. If we don't do it now, we'll be talking about it forever and never know what it's really like." I could feel my pulse quicken as we prepared. There was a certain weight to the night, as though the air itself was holding its breath. We all sat in a circle, our hands resting on the planchette of the Ouija board. The candles flickered in the stillness, casting long shadows across our faces. The wind had died down, leaving behind an eerie silence. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I didn't want to admit it, but fear was creeping up my spine. Mia didn't answer, but I saw her nod. Jake did the same, though he looked pale. Ethan just smirked, his cocky grin still plastered on his face. We began the incantation, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Gravekeeper, hear our call. We seek your presence, here and now. Show yourself, reveal your truth." A gust of wind swept over us as we repeated the words, making the candles flicker violently. For a moment, nothing happened. My heart was racing in my chest. Had we done it wrong? Was the gravekeeper not listening? Then, suddenly, Mia gasped, "Did you see that?" Her voice was sharp with panic, her eyes wide. I turned to look at her. Her gaze was fixed on the crypt, and I followed her line of sight. A shadow moved near the crypt. It wasn't like a person, but more like an absence of light, something that shouldn't have been there. I felt a cold shiver run through me. "Who's there?" Mia shouted, her voice cracking. She stood up abruptly, her hands clutching her chest. "Show yourself." A deep, rasping voice seemed to come from nowhere, and yet it filled the space around us. You called me. Ethan let out a nervous laugh, though I could see the unease in his eyes. Nice one, Jake. You got us. Thought you could prank me, huh? Jake's face had gone ashen. He didn't respond to Ethan's teasing, his eyes wide with fear. It was clear he wasn't joking. The Ouija board trembled under our fingers. We hadn't moved the planchette, but it started to slide slowly across the board, as though it were being pulled by some unseen force. The letters it landed on sent a chill down my spine. L-E-V. I looked around at my friends, their faces pale and filled with dread. A part of me wanted to listen to the warning and end the seance right there, but Ethan, as always, was the first to break the silence. If you're real, show yourself, he shouted, his voice shaky but defiant. Come on, we're not afraid of you. The wind picked up again, the cold bite of it cutting through us. The candles flickered and sputtered, and then, in an instant, they went out completely. Darkness enveloped us. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, and before I could react, a cold force grabbed me, pulling me back. I heard Mia scream beside me, but my own voice was trapped in my throat. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, as if it was alive, and I couldn't move. But the worst was what happened next. Ethan, standing closest to crypt, suddenly lurched forward, his eyes wide with terror. He was being pulled. I could see invisible hands yanking him towards the crypt's dark mouth. His feet scrambled on the cold stone ground as he fought, his hands reaching out in vain for something, anything to hold on to. Ethan! I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the howling wind that had now risen to a deafening roar. Ethan's body jerked violently, and then, just as quickly as it had started, he was gone. The shadows had swallowed him whole, pulling him into the crypt with a force I couldn't comprehend. I don't know how we managed to escape. We ran, our hearts pounding, fear consuming us with every step. It wasn't until we reached the edge of the cemetery, the safe distance of the road behind us, that we stopped to catch our breath. The moonlight seemed almost comforting, but I couldn't shake the image of Ethan, vanishing into the crypt. Dawn was breaking as we returned, each step feeling like an eternity. The cemetery was eerily still, the gravekeeper's crypt just as silent as it had been when we first arrived. But there, near the sealed entrance, we found something that made my stomach twist. Ethan's shoe, lying abandoned in the dirt. He was never seen again. We searched the cemetery for hours, but there was no trace of him, no sign of a struggle, no evidence of where he had gone. It was as if he had been erased from existence. We never spoke of that night again. None of us. The cemetery, the crypt, the gravekeeper, they became things we would not acknowledge, not even in our nightmares. I've tried to forget, to move on, but every so often, when I find myself standing in the dark, I hear it, a whisper, a voice calling from the depths. You called me.